on the ragged edge of the ultima segmentum, where the Emperor's light gutters like a dying candle against the encroaching horrors of the Ghoul Star, lies the forsaken production world of Malm-R 1. Today, we meet the defenders of the planet as we march across the war zones of Malm-R 1, from the deepest bastions of Imperial might to the very far edges of the world where greenskin infest the mountains. From the dregs of the Aurelian Desert Militia and battle-scarred Astra Militarum veterans to the chosen leaders of the war effort, here everybody will bleed as they make their final stand and lay down their lives for the Emperor. The Planetary Defense Force. Before the war, this collection of men and women served as the primary security and enforcement arm under Governor Rice's iron will. With the planet's designation for quiet abandonment, they were not maintained or kept up to any sort of imperial standard, but with the abandonment overturned by the discovery of the Aurelian sand, their ranks began to swell again along with their armories. The PDF focused on maintaining order in the swelling labor hubs and manufactorums, quelling work gang riots in dust-covered factory districts, and enforcing harsh production quotas. Lightly armed with stop weapons and the regular mass-produced las guns, each fitted with a local Aurelian lens and a handful of lightly armored vehicles, they were nothing more than a police force than actual soldiers. Each member of the PDF is a local from indentured mining gangs or some sort of laborer, but has found their way into what could be the resemblance of a better life here. With limited training, basically limited down to riot suppression and parade drills, these men and women had gotten an awakening after the event of the great arrival of Warlord Scalawaba. After the Orc invasion began, and with the governor disappearing from public view, the PDF has been fully militarized and funneled into the thin red line defending Malm-R Prime. They man the outer trenches, the networks and sandbag redoubts in the blistering desert, with shifting dunes swallowing up positions overnight. Their role now is simply to hold the line against the greenskins and all of the enemies that come, while the precious Aurelian sand is being ferried off to the command bunker and then to be ferried off-world. Meanwhile, they are expected to ration dwindling power packs and feeding casualty reports to the War Council. Under-equipped compared to true Imperial forces, they rely on sheer numbers and desperate fanaticism. Before the war, the Aurelian Desert Militia did not exist. There were no such thing as this organization. They were instead known as the Malm-R 1's Redemption Cohort, and it worked as the last desperate mercy granted by the Honorable Governor Alabaster Rice to criminals, sinners, and human refuse of the single bloated city of Malm-R Prime. Thieves who skimmed precious resources from processing plants, laborers who murdered overseers, smugglers, gangers, failed wardens, and those who whispers and spread the forbidden tales of the Ghoul Stars. Before that, they would have seen redemption through the hardest of penal labor. Now they are all been given a new choice: the firing squad or to fight against the Green Horde. Branded with crude aquillas on their foreheads or forearms, and often fitted with a crude shock bolt or explosive penitent collar, these convicts were issued threadbare desert fatigues and second-hand weaponry, if any, and sent into the merciless dunes for scouting and other dangerous activities like measuring artillery targeting distances and the preparation of minefields. The Aurelian Desert Militia has surprised many as they have become one of the most vicious and unpredictable weapons on Malm-R 1. Desperate men and women fighting for survival harder than anyone else. This very desperation and therefore ruthlessness that once made them criminals now fuel a terrifying ferocity born of hope for redemption or as a final middle finger to those who place them in their position. Clad in sand-scoured damaged carapace and ragged dust capes, they will fight and stand just as any in the trenches. However, these fight with a pistol at their back. The Astra Militarum Regiment of the 117th Cal 5 Wardens were already a regiment that has seen far too much action. At this point, they have been ground into what would be considered dust officially rendered combat ineffective. These veterans are of the brutal Calfine compliance and had already before that been deployed in the Third War for Armageddon. They have arrived on the isolation Malm-R 1 as little more than a battered cadre, and what has been thousands of disciplined guardsmen are now barely a couple of companies. Sent to this production world for rest and reinforcement under the Imperial Governor Rice, they were meant to lick their wounds, draw fresh conscripts from the hive labor gangs, and refit their surviving heavy-duty battle tanks in the local forges. Secondary duty while on-world was to help in the running of the endless harvest of the Aurelian sand. Instead, they found a subpar and empty barracks and the cold rays of a dying star above the dunes. In coherence with the High General of the planet, they've set up light perimeter drills around Malm-R Prime, ceremonial parades to remind the local PDF who the real soldiers were, and a grim task of integrating a handful of raw replacement who never fully would replace any comrade already lost to Xenos and the Void. Now, the green tide of the Orc warlord, Iron-Faced Scalawagger, has crashed over them without mercy. The 117th will be ground even thinner and even more into dust. However, those that still stand and those that still remain are among the finest that the Imperial Guard can ever muster. These three groups stand as the bulwark that the green tide will clash upon, but they are not alone, for behind them in the command bunker resides the Lord Castellan, the Grand Warden, the High General, and, of course, the Executioner Marshal. Before the war, the Lord Castellan functions as the direct aid and right hand of the planetary governor of Malm-R. In the planet's single isolated settlement, they manage the day-to-day machinery of governance, overseeing the planetary bureaucracy, coordinating type shipments to the administratum, handling petitions from the noble houses and guild cartels, and acting as the governor's voice in all off-world communications with such things as merchant fleets, ecclesiarchic emissaries, and the occasional Minitorum audit. The Castellan ensured that the fragile web of feudal obligations, labor quotas, and resource levies kept the colony functioning without the need for the governor's personal attention. However, after the war began, and with the governor often absent, they found themselves stepping into an even more important role as diplomat, fixer, and social architect of the war effort. The influence of the Castellan now revolves around making scarce resources flow where they're needed, rerouting Prometheum from the under-settlement foundries, negotiating emergency conscript edicts, and appeasing the ever-demanding administratum with carefully worded reports that disguise Malm-R's dire situation. The Grand Warden remembers a time where they considered a bad day to be one where they had to deal with the rabble and labor gangs. Before the war, as Grand Warden of Malm-R, they commanded the internal security apparatus of the lone settlement. Duties were those of containment, breaking up work gang riots in the manufactorums, rooting out smuggling rings in the lower hab levels, and monitor dissident factions among the indentured miners, and maintaining the iron grip of imperial order so that the governor's tithes and production quotas were never threatened from within. Now, the Grand Warden used their hard-won knowledge of espionage, infiltration, and silent operations to project power far beyond the settlement's walls. Networks of informants, shadow teams, and saboteurs gather real-time intelligence from the battlefield, mapping Orc warbands before they coalesce and strike preemptively. The Grand Warden deal with greenskin threats while they're still small, working tirelessly to fight the war before it can reach its critical mass. For the High General, the days of drills, exercises, and parades seems like ages ago. Before the war, as High General of Malm-R's planetary defense force, they were master of ceremony and readiness, effectively a glorified figurine from a glorious background from the Scholar Progenium. The High General oversaw endless regimental musters on the parade grounds, conducting mock battles for the governor's amusement, inspecting uniforms and kit, and ensured that a PDF regiment somehow looked imposing enough to satisfy any visiting imperial dignity. Actual combat was theoretical. Their true skill lays in maintaining discipline and martial pomp within the confines of the singular settlement. Nowadays, the days are casualty numbers and a merciless arithmetic of war. The High General commands the assignment and deployment of men, reinforcement, battle tanks, basilisk artillery batteries, and chimera transport. Every day brings fresh tallies of the dead, every dusk a frantic scrabble to redistribute dwindling stocks of shells, fuel, and lasgun power packs. They rotate exhausted companies, rations the last reserve of medical supplies, and by the Emperor's grace forge a coherent defense from the broken remnants of Malm-R's military. Victory is no longer measured in parade ground precision, but in whether or not the line holds for one more day. To most on the planet, the Imperium might be a distant memory, but as long as the Executor Marshal is here, the light of humanity shall never waver. Before the war, the Marshal blended law, faith, and morale into coherence. With an ever-present retinue of clerks, ministerium priests, enforcers, and vox sailors, they delivered rousing speeches at public musters and on holy days enforced conscription and labor edicts, while conducting public executions of heretic and slackers. They were the voice and the lash of imperial authority in the governor's absence, and in these dark days, their force of personality and entire cadre of personnel continue to spread the message that the people of Malm-R 1 will never give up. The Executor Marshal walks the hat blocks in Manufactorum, broadcasting sermons of defiance and sacrifice, enforcing martial law with summary tribunals, rationing food and water under the seal of the Emperor, and brand cowards and defeatists as traitor worthy of a firing squad. Even as astropathic silence and Xenos sieges Malm-R, they keep the word and the flame burning, reminding every citizen that to die in the service of the Emperor is to sit at his right hand, and that surrender is a fate far worse than any death. These willing heroes of the Imperium are working here from the command bunker. Buried deep beneath the shifting dunes near Malm-R Prime, this standard template construct of reinforced ferrocrete complex serve as the nerve center for the War Council. Vox arrays crackling with static-laced reports, while cogitators hum under the watchful eyes of military assistants and Adeptus Mechanicus personnel. Alongside exhausted officers pulling triple shifts, the planetary governor Alabaster Rise has yet to set foot here, and only occasionally appear via scratchy hollow projections. The defenders of the planet huddle in dimly lit chambers, coordinating trench rotations and evacuation convoys for the priceless Aurelian sand stockpiles. Rumors persist of strange whisperers echoing from the lower levels of the bunkers, where Lumens keeps misfiring and dying out. If Scalawabba reaches inside of these hallowed halls, all is lost. Leaving behind the fortified bunkers, we sweep across the battlefields of flattened kill zone towards Malm-R Prime. The bloated city and production capital of Malm-R 1 rises like a horizon of jagged rusted iron teeth from the desert's edge. Built on top of an ancient colony structure, this modest yet thriving sprawl consists of shanty districts, manufactorums belching smoke, and hat blocks crammed with laborers and faithful. Sand-swept streets glint with iridescent Aurelian grit under polluted skies, creating streets that, despite the sod, glimmers with a hint of gold. Collapsed walls and looted ruins make up the outer rim of the city as the oldest signs of the green-screen presence before the trench line was formed. This is one of the primary objectives: hold the city and keep it intact, as this is the very reason for the war, the wondrous Aurelian grains. Here the war will come down to street fighting, barricade assaults, and rooftop sniper duels, while PDF and Guard veterans man the walls. However, when the light of the weak sun of this place goes down below the horizon, stories of ghost lights bring fear and paranoia, and those who allegedly witness it might just be rumors, but something say that people disappear at night. Scanning the horizon from ways to approach the city, a scout will gaze south towards Malm-R 1's remaining oceans. These bodies of water are shrinking rapidly and has been poisoned by industrial runoff and the relentless desertification and refinement of mineral sand. This leaves behind a toxic marshland where still city scrapes a living from the runoffs of what once was a temperate waters teeming with life. Now they form a toxic, brackish expanse, lapping against eroding jungle and desert fringes. Oil-slicked waves reflect the cold, dying stars at night, and rumors speak of unnatural things staring in the depths. Very little will survive for very long here if not properly protected, but this might serve as a last-ditch evacuation route should defenders be cut off. Clustered to the north of the city, around the surface of one of the few precious resources of pure water on the planet, the water refineries are a sprawling complex of rusting distillation towers, filtration plants, and massive holding tanks that stab into the ground past rocky layers. The air here hangs heavily with chemical vapor of filtration chemicals, and the constant roar of pumps are deafening. Pipe networks snake through salt-encrusted grounds, creating a maze of elevated walkways, catwalks, and flooded lower chambers. The water refinery serves as a strategic choke point and secondary objective. Holding them prevents mass dehydration and morale collapse among the PDF and guard forces, while orcs raid them aggressively, for even hardy greenskins need water for survival. Battles here will often involve brutal close-quarters fighting amid slippery walkways, explosive pipe ruptures that create flooding hazards, and desperate sabotage missions. Looking towards the east, rising like a jagged, blood-stained monument from the shifting dunes, we see the Pillar of Martyrs. It's a towering natural rock formation that has been sanctified and fortified by the Imperium. Its sheer cliffs and wind-scoured face are carved with thousands of names and crude aquillas, honoring the countless PDF troopers, conscripted laborers, and early guard casualties who fell in the first wave of the Orc invasion. While, if one digs in the sand around the pillar, they will find older names which are yet to be found in any record on the planet. At its summit stands a massive brazier shrine, with eternal Promethean flames burn day and night, visible for dozens of kilometers across the desert as a defiant beacon of faith. An isolationist sect of emperor worshippers calling themselves Keepers of the Golden Vow keeps the ground sanctified and will stand against any that will defile the place, be they human or greenskin. Vox relays and signal flares allow it to serve as a vital coordination point for trench networks and desert patrols. However, the isolation and the cold rays from the ghoul star that bathe the pillar at night have bred dark legend, as troopers whispers of ghoul light appearing among the carved names, driving men and women to madness. The high ground and view of the approach creates a strong point for a heroic gun line, where the elevation that is ideal area for an artillery park. Orcs see this glowing brazier as a challenge that they want to tear down, and holding this place will be a heroic stand against overwhelming odds. But if the Pillar of Martyrs are not enough of a symbol of imperial might, there exists a newly formed one. On the wind-scoured outskirts of the city, where the last cracked Pharaoh Creed of the Hive City gives way to the merciless Aurelian dunes, lies Muster Point Alpha, the largest and most vital staging ground still held by the Defenders. What was once an orderly parade plaza, built in the brighter days to receive fresh PDF recruits, have now become a sprawling, improvised fortress born out of desperation. Vast swaths of the original plaza have been swallowed by the ever-encroaching desert, forcing the Imperium's forces to carve their muster point directly into the shifting sands. The entire area is now a chaotic patchwork of hasty fortifications thrown together under constant threat, rows of battered Chimera and battered Lehman Rush tanks, and ferrocrete walls made out of ruins and shipping containers. Makeshift watchtowers, little more than scaffolding, Promethean drums and salvage crane arms rise unevenly across the perimeter, the platforms crowded with heavy stoppers and autocannon teams. Between them stretches endless line of sacking cannon stands and prefabricated HAB modules, many still bearing the faded insignia of the Astra Militarum regiment that was supposed to be resting and refitting here. Any battle the defenders have here will be backed by heavy weapons, tanks, reinforcement, and a full defensive secondary battle line. Let the green wave come and break here if it must, because besides the command bunker, this is the strongest point on the planet. Besides Muster Point Alpha lies a vast network of dust-choked fire trenches, razor wire entanglements, and pillowbox snakes across the approaches of Malm-R Prime and the refineries. Dug by the Aurelian Desert militia in the blistering heat, these lines are a meat grinder of sand-filled bunkers, collapsed sections, and no man's land littered with corpses and broken scrap. Last fire cracks across the waste while mortars churn the dunes. Orcs charging the positions in howling waves. Scenarios here emphasizes attrition warfare, tunnel fights, and holding key strongpoints long enough for sand stockpiles to be moved rearward. Beyond the trenches lies the merciless heart of Malm-R 1. Vast shifting seas of dunes glittering with Aurelian sand under the harsh cold sun. Jungles have been cleared to expand the extraction, leaving an arid wasteland of mirages, sodden sandstormed and buried ruins of old. Vehicle columns get bogged down here, ambushes hide inside of the dune shadows, a long-range duel between basilisk and orc artillery echo across the emptiness. Orcs thrive here with looted boogies and bikes, treating this area as a playground for speed freaks. Defenders here use hit-and-run tactics and static fire bases, and the Ghoulstar's legend speaks of sand raves that claim the unwary, perhaps just superstition, or perhaps something far older. To the deep south lies the canyons, deep wind-scoured rock canyons cut through the desert fringes, offering natural choke points and ambush corridors. Sheer walls amplify the roar of engines and the bellow of orcs, while narrow passages funnel into the attackers' kill zones. Ancient mineral veins and collapsed mine shafts honeycomb the cliffs, perfect for guerrilla warfare, convoy escorts, and canyon runs where orc attempt to crump the narrow bit. Falling rocks, booby traps, and close quarters melee with chain swords against orc weapons define this fighting area. The last remaining jungle of Malm-R 1, originally a temperate jungle, clings to the equator belt and coastal lowlands, rapidly being logged and burned to feed the desert expansion and industry. Dense foliage, steaming humidity, and hidden ruins create a claustrophobic nightmare of vines, carnivorous plants, and feral wildlife. PDF patrol and scouting patrols clash with orc infiltrators who use this cover to advance against the trench line. Battles here will involve jungle ambushes, clearing operations, and desperate fights to protect evacuation routes. The jungle's decay mirror the planet's faith, once hopeful and now sacrificed to the Imperium's hunger. Deep within the jungle, however, lies a grotesque fungal infestation in a clear jungle valley of polluted lowland. Here, the orc spores have taken root with unnatural speed. Towering, squig-infested mushrooms and glowing spore clouds create a nightmarish alien biome among the human world. Orcs view it as an almost sacred ground for the good stuff, spawning more orcs and fueling the war. Imperial forces, if they wish to win this, must burn or at least contain it before it spreads to other sections, turning battles here into biohorror scenarios with spore-choked visibility going down. To the north of the jungle lies massive depots of promethium and industrial fuels stored in rusting tanks and pipelines. Vital for powering refineries, vehicles, and generators, this yard is a tinderbox. One spark could create firestorms visible from orbit, and sand dunes encroach on its perimeters, mixing grit with leaking fuel. Orcs raided relentlessly for their burny juice to fuel their scrap engines and bombs. Any fighting here will be sabotage runs and holding the yard as a choke point while draining its resources for yourself, and if you wish to defend this area after reclaiming it, you will do so amongst black smoke and roaring flames. To the very south of the Orc line lies Mechtown, a sprawling ramshackle Orc settlement rapidly metastasizing on the planet's far side and in captured desert outpost. Built from looted Imperial wreckage and scrap, it teeters with Orcs everywhere, smoke-belching forges and arenas where boys test their brand new custom weapons. Big mechs and mech boys rule here, hammering out crude tanks, bikes, and some scouts report of a Gargant being built here. This is the anvil of Scalawhopper's war, a chaotic hub of violence and invention. Imperial strikes here would aim to disrupt the productions, while Orcs launch relentless raids from the city's depths. And finally, we arrive at the Rock, a jagged fortified rocky outcrop overlooking all of the key approaches to Malm-R Prime. Perhaps an ancient natural formation turned into a watch post or gun emplacement, the Rock serves as a high ground bastion for artillery spotters and snipers. Its cracks is riddled with caves and defensive position, and wind howls here. This is the main spot of Scalawhopper, from where he commands, and for those who know of the Orc lore will know that this is no natural thing. It is where the Orcs came to the planet and where all of the blood is being spilled from. This is where the Emperor's faithful will kill and die, so that one more shipment of Aurelian sand might escape into the void. This will be a tale of death and sacrifice measured in blood and sand, and now you have both met the Defenders, the Areas, and the enemy. Welcome to the Meat Grinder.